Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
I'm Andrew McWin. I'm actually a visiting professor of biology here, and I'm a member of Rice Creek Associates. And I'm here to introduce Dr. Steve Sheffield. And he is a graduate of SUNY Oswego from 1978. He got a Bachelor of Arts degree in zoology, and he is currently a professor at Bowie State University in the Department of Natural Sciences. And so Steve works a lot with mammals and birds. He's very active in scientific organizations, and he gave a fantastic seminar yesterday for the biology department for students and faculty about mammal ecology populations in Pennsylvania. And he's here today to talk to you about the importance of large mammalian carnivores. Steve?
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. I appreciate you serving as my host for both of the talks. It's really great. Can everybody hear me okay? I generally don't need a microphone, but I want to make sure everybody can hear me. So it's a real thrill for me to be back here to enjoy a full circle moment from the days when in the 70s when I didn't know anything to the days when I know a few things now. So I am real happy to be here, and thank you all for coming out this afternoon. Yesterday's talk was dealing with a long-term research project that I've been working on in Western Pennsylvania, dealing with impacts on tornado blowdowns on mammals. It was a little bit more technical in nature and had some data in it. This one's a little bit less technical, and it's more of a educational presentation. I have been working on this since before the pandemic, and I had to put it on the back burner for a while for other reasons. And I pulled it back out again this fall and continued to work on it and got it done recently. And it is a PowerPoint that we are going to make available eventually. And when I say we, I mean American Society of Mammalogists. This is their logo right there. That's one of the scientific societies that I belong to. And it's also one that I learned about from one of my professors here at Oswego. And so Dr. Al Lackey was my mentor here. He used to work in Rice Creek. He had an office in Rice Creek, as well as over in Snake Hall, I believe it was. And he had I always used to remember walking in and seeing those carousels with slides. He had about 50 of them in there because he started the Mammalian slide library for this society, American Society of Mammalogists. So he was very active in that society, and he kind of was influential to me in being able to have an interest in mammals, and then looking at how do I express that? Well, I can work on them, but I can also be part of the scientific society that's devoted to mammals. Okay, so I've been a member of that society since 1980. So that's a lot of years. So this is supposed to be, and this is the first time I've shown it to anybody, and it hasn't been officially approved yet by the society, but I'm positive that it will be. And so we're going to make this available to teachers at every level to be able to educate their students and to educate the general public on the ecological importance of large mammalian carnivores. So there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of other things that prevent us from placing greater value on these species. Okay, so that's what I'm going to talk about in this presentation. Okay, let's get this. Not working. No. Maybe I need to do the keyboard. I can't. This is not working.
I think you can do it. Click on the presentation. Nope. Oh,
There it goes. Did that go from the clicker or did it go from the keyboard?
I think the clicker, I believe.
Okay. All right. So what are we talking about? We're talking about large mammalian carnivores. So let's see. Do we need that right there? It's blocking my slides.
I
You know, what's hiding back there is my absolute favorite large-man carnivore. And it's really not super large, but it's cool. That's Wolverine. That's the Wolverine. And I have seen one in the wild in Alaska, and they are, like, you can't forget it. It's just absolutely amazing. He was walking alongside the road, and I'm driving down from between Anchorage and Seward, and this guy just kind of walked along the road there, and I realized what I saw. I stopped, I hit the brakes, I started going back, and he took off. So these are what I'm characterizing as large-man carnivores. This guy is not as large as these guys, but he's in there for a reason, mainly because I like him. So gray wolf, red wolf, mountain lion, also known as puma, and there's 15 other different names they go with. Whoops.
That's his smart board, so if you touch it, it will advance.
Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay. It's no.
At least you didn't draw on it. Some people think it's a dry erase board.
Yeah, I didn't do that. Oh no, it's going the wrong way. No. I can't get it to go the right way here. No.
Technology's great until it doesn't work.
It's not good.
There you go.
The two
left
pointing
and
out that way.
Yep. Well, we'll move you forward.
Sorry about that. So mountain lion, coyote, grizzly bear, technically they're called brown bears. Okay, so the technical common name for that is brown bear, but a lot of us like to call them grizzly bears. Okay, so brown bear, polar bear, black bear, Canada lynx, and Wolverine. So these are the guys that we're talking about. And remember now, this is North America, so we're not, there's a separate set of large mammalian carnivores that are found in Asia, another set in Europe, another set in South America, etc. So that's what we're looking at here. So these are the players. So I thought I'd put this in here because it kind of gives us insight into what their situation is. So look at the bolded letters. Endangered. Coyote's not listed. Grizzly bear, threatened. Polar bear, endangered. Threatened. So they all have some level of threat that they have, threats that they have to deal with. Okay. Gray wolf. So right now they have been endangered for a long time, but some of them are not, except for the Rocky Mountain population is not listed as endangered. And that's because there's a lot of reasons for that, but as part of it's political, it has to do with the Northern Rocky Mountain states and the fact that they fought really hard to try to control them at the state level. And so they are presently having very generous hunting seasons for them in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and so they're basically culling a large percentage of the population there. So, but the rest of the country, they're listed as endangered. And that also includes the Mexican wolf. So the Mexican wolf is a subspecies of gray wolf, and there's very few of those left. And they only occur in Arizona, parts of Arizona and New Mexico, and that's it. And they're in such a bad shape, Mexican wolf is, that it was, I think, 5 or 6 years ago, the alpha pack of the Mexican wolf, the male and female, both only had 3 legs. That's how bad they were. They were in really bad shape. So they basically put them in this box. They have to stay south of the interstate, and they don't know how to read maps. They don't know that they can't go over this interstate. So if they wander out of their box, they get shot. So that's what they deal with. And red wolf is the same way. So red wolf, there's only an estimated 18 right now, 18 left in the entire world. Captive, we got over 250 in captivity. Why? Because they do well in captivity. They'll breed in captivity. They're in several places around the country, Tacoma and other zoos, they have them. And so they do well in captivity, but as soon as you release them in the wild, then they run into problems. They're only found in eastern North Carolina. Dare County is the only place that you find them. And the problem with them is that the number is now so low that when you release them and they come in contact with coyotes, they hybridize. And so what you're doing is you're swamping out the genetics of the red wolf with the coyote, and then they now become something different from a red wolf. And the problem that they have now is that federal government, if it's ESA, it's federal government, but the state of North Carolina also has to cooperate, and they're not cooperating. So the feds and the state are arguing over how they're going to do this. In the meantime, the numbers have gone down. They were down to almost 10, I think, and now they're up to 18. So that one's in a real problem. Mountain lions in the east, they were declared extinct. So the whole eastern U.S., they are listed by Fish and Wildlife Service as extinct. And what that means is there's ramifications of that. What that means is Fish and Wildlife Service has washed their hands of it. That means they no longer have to do any management or any protection because they're officially listed as extinct. See what happens? That's what happens when you list something as extinct. Florida panther, I was just down in the Everglades a few weeks ago. I did not see a Florida panther. I was looking for them, didn't see them. They basically are in a box down there between Naples and Miami. And the box is getting smaller and smaller and smaller with all the development. And there's less than 200 left in the wild, and they continue to decline. And every year, about 25% of them, of the whole population, get hit by cars or trucks. So they're in bad shape. Coyotes, they're doing okay. What's really interesting about coyotes is coyotes are survivors. And coyotes, when you control them, the populations that are controlled actively by humans, they are going to have, they're going to increase their litter size versus populations that are not controlled. So if the population's not controlled, they might have 4 or 5 offspring. If there are populations that are controlled actively, they're going to have 7. So they make up for their losses by increasing their reproductive productivity. So they're very adaptable. And so they're going to be found everywhere. And they're actually found all the way over to the Atlantic Ocean now. Previously, the red wolves kept them out. Wolves will kill coyotes because coyotes are the smaller cousin, basically. So they kill the cousin. So once the red wolves were wiped out, it's like an open door for the coyotes. So they were found from the Midwest going west to the Pacific Ocean. Now they've crossed all the way across the Southeast, and they occur all the way over to the Atlantic Ocean now. So pretty much all over the U.S. because of the loss of these wolves that control them. Grizzly bears are in bad shape. They're threatened in the lower 48. There's basically 5 big populations of them. Yellowstone is the biggest one. And there's the Continental Divide population near where Glacier National Park is another one. And then there's a couple of other very smaller populations. They're doing much better in Alaska. But in the lower 48, they're not doing good at all. Polar bears are in big trouble. They are threatened. And it's mainly because of loss of sea ice. Okay, so the sea ice disappears. Why is that important? Because seals have to have sea ice. And if the sea ice is gone, there's no seals. If there's no seals, there's no polar bear food. The polar bears eat the seals. So the polar bears are wandering around all over the Arctic looking for food. And they eventually will come into human habitations, and they'll try to get into dumpsters and do everything that we're used to with black bears. And oh, I touched it again. Jeez. I gotta stop touching that screen.
Same problem.
All right, yeah, so polar bears have a lot of problems, and it was the first species to be listed on the ESA because of climate change. First one. So they were very reticent or very not wanting to be able to list anything because of climate change. There was a lot of people that were denying climate change. Climate change is real. I've seen it many times in many places, and so these guys are really in a problem, in a pinch, because of the fact of loss of sea ice. And so they have to adapt, and they have to adapt fast, because the food source, the seals, was their main food source. And without that, and without all that fat that they're getting from the seals, they have a real big energy loss that they have to make up. And so they're trying to eat anything they can. What else was I going to mention about them? So another problem comes in because of climate change. As things get warmer, different animals and plants are going to move north. So they move north latitude, they move upwards because it's getting warmer as you go north. And so they move with it. And one of the species that's moved with it is the grizzly bear. Okay, and so we've got the polar bears are up here in the Arctic, and the grizzly bears are here, and they start moving up this way like that, and they have come in contact. And when they come in contact, they hybridize. And when they hybridize, you end up with what's called a pizzly bear or a roller bear, depending on whether the polar bear that's doing the breeding is a male or female. That will tell you which common name they get. But I've seen photos of them, and they are white and black and brown. So, and the thing that's intriguing about it is that they are fertile. So the offspring are fertile, so they can have offspring. Okay, and so why does that happen? Hybridization is very common in animals, particularly birds and mammals. And it's common. I want to say that what I saw, the figure I saw for birds is that about 10% of all bird species normally hybridize. But in this case, what's happening is the numbers of the animals are so low that if a grizzly bear that's moving north and runs into a polar bear as opposite sex, then they will hybridize because there's not other options for them. Okay, and so that happens, and so they're running into this problem also. So a question would be, a logical question would be, are these different species actually? Were they the same species, and then one took to an Arctic more environment, and the other one was more boreal forest type, and then you separate them for a period of time, and then you bring them back together again? That's what's happened. So has it been enough time to separate them as different species? Don't know. According to the biological species concept, they're the same species because they have fertile offspring. Okay, so polar bears got some real serious problems. Black bear's not listed. The Louisiana subspecies was listed, but it was delisted. So they took it off the list because it recovered. Canada lynx is threatened. Lower 48 states, loss of habitat. In Alaska, they occur in Alaska, and they are more common up there. And wolverine, same thing again. They were just listed within the last few months. They were listed as threatened. I personally wrote a letter to the Fish and Wildlife Service in 1998 asking them to do that. And they wrote back saying, well, we don't have enough information. We can't do that. I saw it coming. I knew it was going to happen. Wolverine's a special case because the females, when they go to den, they have to have a certain depth of snow. And so you look at the data of snow depth throughout the West where the wolverines occur, and the snow depths are really low. And there's very few places where it meets the minimum criteria for the female. And so because of that, their numbers, I didn't put the numbers up here, but there's less than 300 in the lower 48. they have a very low density, population density. So, and they move around a lot. They can move hundreds of miles in a day. They just move around, they just wander around because they don't generally run into each other because the population density is so low. Okay, I guess I can do this. There we go. So here I just threw in one example of numbers, and this is for the gray wolf. So this came from the Wolf Conservation Center in New York. So this gives you an idea of the remaining numbers of wolves. So you can see that's red wolf right there in North Carolina. The ones in Colorado were just introduced there because the citizens of Colorado decided they wanted wolves. And so that was on the ballot in November, and they voted to have wolves reintroduced into Colorado. So they are native to Colorado, but they were wiped out. So the people decided we want them. So they're starting to bring them back in there. This is Mexican wolf right here. That number I think is a little high. This is the Northern Rocky Mountain wolves right here. And Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon have some. And then Alaska has a lot. But these numbers are all, for the gray wolf, they're all declining. All right, every single one of them is declining. So I just wanted to, for one of the species, I thought this was a really good map to show with the numbers on it to give you an idea of what's happening. So these large mammalian carnivores are disappearing. These species that I just showed you, they're all restricted to tiny fractions of their former range, less than 5% in almost all these cases. So the ramifications of that are that the integrity of biological communities over a large part of the land on this planet are threatened by distorted predation regimes. And so predation activities create impacts that ripple down through the trophic levels of an ecosystem. So you have to consider that everything is connected. And so if you remove the large mammalian carnivores, what's going to happen to the medium-sized carnivores? What's going to happen to the small carnivores? What's going to happen to the prey items? What's going to happen to the plant communities? What's going to happen to the streams and what direction they run? As I may mention, I might forget, but I'll mention it right now. The reintroduction of gray wolves in Yellowstone actually caused the river that runs through Yellowstone to change course. It actually caused it to happen. Why? Because the elk were overpopulated throughout the whole national park, and they were eating all of the shrubs all over the place, but particularly along the river. And so they were basically taking all the vegetation out of that. And so the songbirds left, and they wouldn't nest there anymore. And that caused a difference in the soil along the banks of the river, and that caused problems. And when the elk, when you move them out of there because you have gray wolves in there, they're going to change their behavior. They're going to change where they hang out because they're now in what's called a landscape of fear. In the landscape of fear is where you have predators with prey. And so they change their behavior all over. And so the shrubs all come back. The songbirds come back in and nest in the shrubs. And the soil regenerates itself along the bank in such a way that it changes the water course back to the way it was when there used to be wolves there. So I'm talking about the actual shape and direction of the streams and rivers can change just because of the presence of wolves. And you know, who would have ever thought that? That is something that blows my mind. So this is a little graph I made about showing the ecological functions. So predation in the center here, it has an impact on the herbivores, which are the prey items. It can have an impact on feral or invasive species. Like I'm going to talk about cats, for example. I mean, I am a cat lover. I love cats. However, there's a place and time for them, and it's a place where they shouldn't be. And so some of these large mammalian carnivores control them. Mesocarnivores, so those are like the middle-sized carnivores. So the large carnivores control the middle-sized carnivores. Like a gray fox would control coyotes. And scavenging. Scavenging is a big deal. Predators actually provide food for the entire ecosystem by killing something. So they'll kill a deer and they'll eat part of it and they'll leave it there, and other animals will come in and they will benefit from that. And so that's an important thing I'm going to talk about. So here are some, I made a list here of some of the ecosystem services that large carnivores are able to provide for us. So stabilizing ecosystems, ecological balance, predation on injured and sick individual prey. That's going to be important because a lot of organisms that are prey items are going to have diseases. And some of those diseases can impact humans. Keeping populations of large herbivores in check. Help minimize crop damage. Controlling mesocarnivores like foxes and coyotes. So if you control them, then that's going to have an impact on what their prey items are. Like, for example, rabbits. Help protect populations of smaller birds, mammals, amphibians, and reptiles. So if you control these guys that are eating these guys, then these guys are going to increase in their numbers. Controlling feral and non-native species like cats. Carbon sequestration and slowing down effects of climate change. So large mammalian carnivores help basically sequester carbon into living organisms in the environment, or in the soil, for example. Provide food for scavengers, scavenging carcasses, disease control, dispersing and recycling of nutrients and seeds. So they're responsible by being able to move nutrients around and seeds and stuff like that, moving them around because of their scavenging. And by the way, a lot of the large mammalian carnivores, they are facultative scavengers. So they would kill a deer, for example, but if they came across a deer that was already dead, they would scavenge it. So they don't have to kill to be able to eat. They can also eat something that's already dead. So it's opportunistic, you know, and hawks and owls are the same way. You know, they're predators, they're going to kill stuff to eat, but they are not going to pass up a free meal. No way. And so that's what the large mammalian carnivores do. They will kill, they will be able to kill prey and eat it, but they'll also not pass up a free meal if it's available to them. And then wildlife ecotourism. I found some amazing data for that. I couldn't fit it all on slides, but I got a few on there, examples of how much benefit humans get from wildlife ecotourism of large mammalian carnivores. So this little diagram here is just talking about stabilizing ecosystems, control the distribution, abundance, and diversity of their prey so that they don't get out of too large of a population, like controlling rabbits, for example, or controlling mice, or controlling rats, things like that. Regulate organisms lower in the food chain. So that means that they have such a rippling effect. They have so much influence over other organisms that are in their ecosystem that are lower in the food chain. Again, small mammals, rabbits, things like that. So they help regulate these things. If you wipe out the large mammalian carnivores, then all of these lower trophic level species are going to explode. And then you've got a whole set of new problems to deal with. So here's some slides of sick individuals. So large carnivores will prey on sick individuals. Why? They're easier to catch. So they don't have to exert themselves as hard than with a healthy animal than if it's a sick animal, and they don't have to chase it as far, or they don't have to wrestle it down as hard. And so they're able to be able to catch these guys and dispatch of them faster. An example, I'm going to talk about chronic wasting disease. So a lot of deer, elk, and other animals like that, the large herbivores, have what's called chronic wasting disease. So I don't know if you've all heard of that before, but it's a real thing. And large mammalian carnivores are important in that regard. in controlling it. Here's a fox right here, red fox with sarcoptic mange. I don't know if you've ever seen an animal with mange before, but it's not a pretty thing. It basically devastates their entire pelage. And so they will have big blotches where all the hair is gone and they've been itching it so hard because it makes them itch. Sarcoptic mange is caused by mites. And so you could maybe relate to it if you ever had chiggers. Anybody had chiggers before? Chiggers are awful and they make your skin itch like crazy and you can itch it until it bleeds because it itches so badly. There are larval mites that occur in the grassy areas, particularly late summer, early fall. And if you go into the right place, they will get in. They're so small you can't see them, and they will get in under your clothes. They like to get under your socks and stuff like that. So the mites affect small carnivores, and they can affect large carnivores also. But with the foxes are controlled by large mammalian carnivores. So a fox with mange will be easier to catch and kill than one without sarcoptic mange. So that's a really nasty disease. I've seen it in red foxes in my area in Maryland. Here's chronic wasting disease. So this is a 2024 map from USGS showing the areas where chronic wasting disease occurs. So there's some right not that far from here. There's a lot of it in Pennsylvania and Maryland, and a lot of it out west. So this is a neurologic prion disease. So it's just to give you an idea of what kind of family of diseases it falls in. Mad cow disease. Think about mad cow. You probably heard of that. Okay, so it's in that same kind of family. Okay, so it impacts both free-ranging and captive large herbivores. Deer, elk, moose, other cervids. And so that map shows 32 states, 5 Canadian provinces is to where it occurs, and it's spreading. It's still spreading now. And before I came here, a couple of days before I came up here, I saw a newspaper article that talked about 2 deer hunters who killed a deer, ate it, got chronic wasting disease from it, and died. Okay, so chronic wasting disease can impact humans. Okay, so the deer have it, and if you kill the wrong deer and eat it, you get chronic wasting disease that will kill you. And that's not a good way to go, definitely. Keeping populations of large herbivores in check. So everybody's probably seen these kind of signs. This one's from Finland, by the way. That's a moose crossing sign in Finland. This one is white-tailed deer that I took in the US. So overpopulation of large herbivores. So why do we have that? Why do we have so many white-tailed deer around? Well, it's the large mammalian carnivores. That's the plain and simple reason. No other reason. Huge areas of massive destruction occur because of them. They alter ecosystems. They impact every trophic level. So having too many white-tailed deer around is very destructive to our ecosystems. Vehicular accidents with large herbivores, property damages, human deaths. And I have on a slide coming up, I have some figures on that. Large herbivores cause other property damage as well. Agriculture, gardens, nurseries, forests. I don't know if any of you have been into a forest where you walk in there and you could see that there's no vegetation on the trees up to about here. It's all stripped all the way from the ground up to as far as the deer can reach. So when the deer populations are really high, they will strip everything. And so you have no understory. There's no understory down there, and all the vegetation on the trees is gone up to as far as they can reach, and then you have vegetation. So that's a true indicator of high white-tailed deer density. Large herbivores are deer disease carriers, I mentioned, and large herbivores behave very differently in the absence of large mammalian carnivores. The landscape of fear. The landscape of fear is actually very real. It changes their behavior altogether. So when they have carnivores in their territories, they are going to behave totally different. They're going to hang out in totally different places. It's going to change their timing of their behavior, and it's going to make them, they're going to be more active at certain times of the day than others if the predators are there versus if they're not there. So they act very, very differently. Because they're trying to avoid being predated. That's what they don't want. So landscape of fear. I'm fascinated by this topic. I'm actually doing a research project right now in West Virginia dealing with landscape of fear with salamanders. And it's very, very interesting because the salamanders there are climbing up into trees. And they generally don't do that. But in this particular system that I'm looking at, I think there's a high density of shrews. And shrews eat salamanders, but shrews cannot climb trees. And so I'm testing that right now, and I can't really get a direct answer from it, but I can get an indirect answer from it. So I'm trapping and getting an idea of the shrew density, and any of the shrews that I get that don't survive, I'm going to check their stomachs for salamander DNA. So, and I've been surveying the populations of the salamanders there, and their densities are very high on all of them, but all of them, with no exception, climb up in the trees. Some of them are 7 to 8 feet off the ground, which is amazing. And we're talking 7 or 8 different species. So they all do it. So what is it? Are they living in a landscape of fear? Well, these salamanders that are up there, they're just hanging out. They're not doing anything, not interacting with each other. They're not eating, they're not drinking. They're just up there. And they're not there in the daytime, they're only there in the nighttime. So this is the kind of thing here that's showing. So on top here, you've got no wolves, and all the elk are just kind of hanging out. They're all having fun. And down here, you have wolves in here, and now you're not having fun. Now you're afraid for your life. And so these elk are behaving totally different. They're hanging out in different locations than up here because the wolves are forcing them to think in a different way for their own survival. So up here, they're not worried about their survival. Down here, they're worried. So that's what landscape of fear is. Anti-predation defense aids survival, but it can carry substantial costs. So these guys down here, these deer and elk, they're going to pay a price for anti-predator defense. Up here, they're not worried about it. So they don't pay that price. Down here, they have to pay that price. So that's going to be, they're not going to be able to eat as much, or they're not going to be able to go places that they want to go. They're not going to be able to go get a drink of water at this pond because they're afraid that the wolves are going to get them. Okay, so that's what landscape of fear is, and that's what large mammalian carnivores are going to provide for us. So trophic cascade, what that means is that the predator, the large mammalian predator, is going to have a direct effect on the herbivore, but it's also going to have effect on the primary producers, which are the plants. So the grasses and the shrubs and the things that the herbivores are eating. Okay, so it's going to have a negative effect on the herbivores because it's going to kill them. And the herbivores have a negative effect on the plants because they're eating them. But the predator is going to have a positive effect on the primary producers, the plants, because they're controlling the herbivores. So having an impact over multiple trophic levels, that's what's referred to as the trophic cascade. So the large mammalian carnivores are causing trophic cascades to occur. So that's very important. White-tailed deer vehicle collisions. So here's some stats. 1.8 million deer vehicle collisions annually in the US. So that was from July 22 to June 23, one full year. That's a lot. And the previous year it was 1.9 million. 164 human deaths in 2021. So I mean, think about that. What is the value of that? That's a question. Why are these poor people dying? Because we have an overabundance of white-tailed deer. Why do we have an overabundance of white-tailed deer? Because we don't have the large mammalian carnivores anymore. Okay, 26,000 human injuries, over $1 billion of property damage. So that is a lot. That is a lot. I got that from a website, Insurance Information Institute. So they had all the stats on deer vehicle collisions. And this is just white-tailed deer. So we're not talking about elk, caribou, moose. We're not talking about any of those collisions. We're only talking about white-tailed deer collisions here. Agricultural crops. So deer cause a lot of damage to agricultural crops, more than any vertebrate species, costing farmers over 100 million annually. Main crops damaged. They like sweet corn, snap beans, leafy vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, and they get into orchards, apples, peaches, and grain crops. So those are the ones that they go towards, and so those are the ones that are getting damaged the most. And this is a picture I took in northern New Mexico of elk out in an ag field with a circle irrigation system. So they were just out there having fun. I stopped the car, and so you could see the guy was looking at me and wondering, like, what am I doing? So they were all having a grand old time out here. No wolves, no mountain lions. They're not in a landscape of fear. They're in a landscape of fun. So that's what they're doing there. Control of mesopredators. So that's the bobcat, red fox. So the large mammalian carnivores control these guys. So if wolves are around or grizzly bears are around or something like that, these guys are going to be scarce. They're going to hide. Why? Because they're living in a landscape of fear. Okay? Because they know that those large mammalian carnivores will take them right out if they can. So they're kept under control by large carnivores. The mesocarnivores can decimate prey populations. So anything that they're preying on, small mammals, rabbits, ground nesting birds, snakes, things like that. So they can decimate those. So if these are controlled, then these populations can increase. There's our kitty cats right here. I love cats. I took this picture on my campus. These two guys were sitting on the side of one of the buildings there and enjoying what cats always do, which is sleep. Cats, I have learned that cats have to have their 18 hours of beauty sleep every day, without fail. So there's an estimated 60 to 100 million feral or stray cats in the U.S. That's a lot. These numbers are astounding. They kill an estimated 3 to 22 billion animals or mammals, 3 to 4 billion birds, 228 to 871 million reptiles, 86 to 322 million amphibians annually in the U.S. So that's every year. They're killing that number. Unowned cats account for 89% of those. So people that let the cats go and just ignore them completely and disavow that they own them, those are the ones that are causing a lot of damage. So this guy right here has got a rabbit, a small rabbit in his mouth. So, I mean, cats are typical predators, and they see something moving, they're going to kill it if they can. So urban carnivores can generally control them. So if you have coyotes, I'm sure we have coyotes in Oswego, they will kill cats, definitely. And they probably will kill small dogs also. So I got that information from a website I found called catster.com. Catster.com in 2024. So I had all the data on what kind of damage cats cause to the ecosystem. So here is a diagram here of climate change, supposed to show climate change. There's a polar bear on a piece of ice that is declining in size. So large vertebrates can increase an ecosystem's ability to store carbon, which is very important for climate change to be able to defend against that by up to 250% through their various activities that they have. Forests with wolves store more carbon than those without wolves. So I got that out of one of the papers published last year. So that is very interesting. So wolves are actually helping us with dealing with climate change. Large mammalian carnivores are going to help contribute to ecosystem adaptation to climate change in a couple of different ways here. So they promote the complexity of trophic or food webs. They increase habitat heterogeneity, in other words, different kinds of habitat in a particular area, enhancing plant dispersal and increased resistance to abrupt ecosystem change. So people would not necessarily attribute helping us with climate change to large mammalian carnivores, but they do, because of their activities, they do that. And so that makes them valuable. Protecting populations of small vertebrates. So I do have, so some of these pictures are not mammals. These are, I put them in there because I like burrowing owls. I study burrowing owls. I have for a long time. So these guys are my favorite owls. So burrowing owls, eastern chipmunk, mountain dusky salamander, which is one of my favorite salamanders, and black rat snake. So these species, these kind of species, benefit from having large mammalian carnivores around because they get predated on by the mesocarnivores. And so the large carnivores will control the mesocarnivores, which will then allow these guys to increase their populations or at least stay stable. Providing food for scavengers. This is really interesting here. They subsidize scavengers. So when a mountain lion makes a kill, one of the behavioral things that they do is they try to cover it up. So they will take their paws and they will go like this and try to cover it up and hide it so anybody else can't find it. But not realizing, of course, that wolves and other things and other large mammalian carnivores have a really good sense of smell, and so they can smell it anyways, even though it's covered. But that's what mountain lions do. So you can tell a mountain lion kill from another type because nobody else really does that, but they do it. So the function here is that it helps stabilize the trophic food dynamics in communities. It affects the assemblages and ecosystem function. Mountain lions abandon more than 2.5 metric tons of meat per month in Chile, which is amazing. Think about that, 2.5 metric tons of meat a month. That's a lot. And so that is going to feed a lot of different animals, particularly scavengers. So you're subsidizing scavengers here. In Yellowstone, gray wolves provide 84.5 to 155.9 kilograms of meat per month per 100 square kilometers to the ecosystem. So that is a lot of food readily available to anyone else who wants to eat it. And most everything wants to eat it. Nobody in the animal kingdom is going to pass up a free meal. They're just not. And so we're talking about everything from other large mammalian carnivores all the way down to microbes and beetles and slugs and you name it. Everything's going to come in and going to have a bite to eat. Okay. So when a mountain lion kills an elk, it's providing food for not just for itself, but for 39 species of birds and mammals and other species like beetles, slugs, snails, flies, microbes, etc. So this diagram I got off the Panthera website. It basically shows mountain lion increases ecosystem health and biodiversity by its actions. So so the birds rely on the worms and insects in the carcasses. So the carcasses providing food for the birds. Foxes depend on the mountain lion prey during the cold winters. So the foxes are really, really cold and hungry, and they come across the mountain lion kill, they can go in and have a bite to eat. Eagles and other raptors, they are facultative scavengers. That means they don't have to scavenge, but they will. And so I have seen, for years, I've seen all different kinds of hawks and even owls come in and scavenge on dead animals. Small mammals have greater access to food because that is going to cause more food production around that carcass. Why? Because a lot of them like to eat insects and things that are feeding on the carcass. Carcasses are providing nutrients and habitat for beetles and other invertebrates, and the soils are becoming enriched by when the carcass breaks down, and some of those nutrients are going directly into the soil as well as going into scavengers. Okay, so the soil is being enhanced here. Here's a couple of different large mammalian carnivores that are scavenging. So there's a wolf right there with an elk carcass, and you can see ravens also in the picture because they're hungry. And there's a mountain lion with a kill and there's polar bears right here with a whale. And so whales wash up very frequently in polar bear habitat. And so somebody has to dispose of that. And polar bears are hungry, they're more than happy to take part in that feast. And then once they're done, then other animals come in and they take part in that feast also. So this is a really important function of large mammalian carnivores, is that they're providing, they're basically subsidizing scavenging. Ecological value of carcass feeding by large carnivores. Here's a wolverine picture feeding on a carcass. And wolverines are gladly scavenging. They're always looking for carcasses to be able to eat. Almost all large mammalian carnivores are facultative scavengers. That means they don't have to do it by definition, but they will do it if they're hungry. Ecological value of carcass removal include recycling nutrients, removing diseased individuals, avoiding an increase in undesirable species. For example, feral dogs. So if they remove a carcass, that's the less food available for wild dogs. Okay, wild dogs are a problem in a lot of places in the US. They cause havoc, and if you provide them less food, then that's good. That will help limit their populations. So the large mammalian carnivores being able to also scavenge, that also helps limit feral dogs to an extent. This is an Australian study with Tasmanian devils. Australian Food Web, carcasses persisted 2.6 times longer, where the largest carnivore, Tasmanian devil, had declined. So once you take the Tasmanian devil is going to be the top of the trophic level of feeding level in Australia, and they don't have the large mammalian carnivores that we have. So Tasmanian devil is the main predator, and so carcasses stayed around longer if you had less of the main predator. Okay, so that highlights the importance of rapid carrion. Carrion is carcass, so that's the technical term. So it highlights the importance of rapid carrion removal. The carcasses need to be removed fast, and so the large mammalian carnivores do that. Ecotourism. Grizzly bears in the McNeil River. Probably a lot of you have seen the video and footage of people watching the bears catch salmon. That's in Katmai National Park in Alaska. I have been there and got to experience that once. It was very nice. I highly recommend it. Polar bears at Churchill, Manitoba. I have not been there yet. Anybody been to Churchill? So they have these buggies out there, the tundra buggies. And so the polar bears will actually come up there and try to get food. And they're not supposed to be fed. And when too many polar bears come in and they exhibit bad behavior, they go to polar bear jail. They actually have a polar bear jail in Churchill, Manitoba. So if they're bad, they go to jail, and then they take them and they move them way away from the town. So because they don't have the sea ice with the seals, they're wandering around looking for food. They're hungry. And if they have a human habitation, they know there's going to be food there. So they're looking for food. They're looking for any kind of garbage or anything that smells. Bears, so everybody knows how good the sense of smell is for dogs, right? Just magnify that for bears. Bears are even better. They have an incredible sense of smell. They could smell food from a long ways away. That's why you have to use bear lockers when you're in grizzly bear territory, because they could smell food. You could put it in a bag, in your sleeping bag, in a tent, and they'd be able to smell it for like a half a mile away. So that's why you got to put your food in a bear locker. But tourism, I mean, Churchill, Manitoba has a huge tourist industry of people wanting to see polar bears. Okay, I want to see them. I want to go there and see them. Gray wolves in Yellowstone and Denali. I saw this guy in Denali. Black face gray wolf. They are there, and they make up a huge wildlife ecotourism business in national parks, including Denali and Yellowstone. Here's Canada lynx in Denali also, and that is a fascinating animal to see in the wild. And their paws, if you see their paws right there, they're like snowshoes. I mean, they're gigantic. They're just huge paws that helps them stay above the snow so they don't sink every time they walk in snow. So they have their own built-in snowshoes on their feet. So watching wildlife tourism, $2 billion industry in Alaska alone. $2 billion, that's not chump change. That's a lot of money. Denali National Park, lack of wolf sightings shown to diminish tourism benefits. So Alaska Board of Game started hunting wolves outside the boundary of Denali National Park. Was that a good idea? I don't think so. So they opened up hunting and trapping of wolves along the boundaries. Wolves started declining substantially in number. How did that affect ecotourism? Visits to the park went from 642,000 to 594,000. Visitor spending decreased from 632 million to 602 million. Jobs decreased from 8150 to 7370. Total economic output went from 924 million to 859 million. So just the absence of gray wolves for ecotourism, look at the economic cost. That is substantial. That's not just a little bit, that's substantial. So, and it trickles down through the whole economy. So not just the park, the jobs, the money for the park, and the money for all the area towns around the park, where the visitors who were there for ecotourism would go spend their money, would stay in a hotel, would go to a restaurant, would buy equipment, all that stuff. So not having the wolves there had a major impact on wildlife ecotourism in Denali. I've been to Denali twice for about a week each time, and I've only seen 2 wolves there my entire time. And one of them was the black bays. Globally, 7% of all global tourism is related to wildlife, and it's growing at an annual rate of 3%. So what does that mean? People want to see wildlife, and they want to see large mammalian carnivores. That's what they want to see. That's what they're willing to spend their money to go see that. And if they're not there, then the economy is going to be negatively impacted. Okay, so almost done here. Threats to large mammalian carnivores. So I have been really big at studying threats. Okay, so I've done that with some of the endangered owls. I've done that with large mammalian carnivores and with some other species. So threats are things that are going to negatively impact the species, whatever species we're talking about. So habitat loss, a lot of them are losing habitat. And remember that they're already less than 5% of their original range, all of them, except for coyotes. Urbanization and development. Urbanization and development is happening faster than you would ever imagine. I was just down in Florida in the Everglades. So you know the Everglades, you've got on the Gulf side, you have Naples, and on the Atlantic side, you have Miami. And the development I saw, this is what's happening. It's just doing this and this and this and this. And they're basically putting it into a smaller and smaller box. Naples is going all the way over. It's just, the development is just booming all the way up the Gulf Coast of Naples, and then moving over into Big Cypress and the Everglades. And Miami is going the other way. And at some point, there's not going to be much left. So urbanization development is happening everywhere. You've probably all seen it in places where you live. I see it around my area in Maryland all the time. They're knocking down stuff and they're putting up new housing everywhere. So that's a problem for large mammalian carnivores. Legal and illegal hunting and trapping is also very big. People like to shoot things, and large mammalian carnivores happen to be something that they like to shoot. USDA Wildlife Services, I put that one in there because that's personal. That's personal to me. Is anybody familiar with USDA Wildlife Services? That's okay. So Wildlife Services is part of APHIS, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Services. And what it does is it's supposed to control wildlife in this country in a way that, so for example, airports. So you're familiar with like geese and things that would hit an engine and damage an airplane. Okay, so they help control wildlife, particularly birds, around airports. Okay, so that's one of their good functions. Okay, one of their bad functions is that they focus on lethal control of wild mammalian carnivores, particularly when it comes to ranchers. So ranchers don't like wolves, they don't like mountain lions, they don't like grizzly bears, and so they will call wildlife services and ask them to come in and take them out. So, and the thing that really upsets me the most is when this is on public land. Okay, public land is our land. It's not anybody else's land. It belongs to us, and I want to have a say on what they're going to do on my land. And a lot of times they go into public land, and the ranchers are behaving badly on our land. They're not doing what they're supposed to do with regard to their livestock, and all of a sudden you have a kill because of something that they didn't do properly. And then they call wildlife services, and wildlife services comes in with all their big weapons and starts killing wolves and killing grizzly bears and stuff like that. So I keep track on an annual basis of all their killing. They are required to report everything they kill, and the numbers of mesocarnivores and large mammalian carnivores that they kill that are non-target are scary. Literally hundreds and thousands of animals that they report. These are the only ones that they're reporting, not the ones that they're not reporting. Okay, so I've had back and forth battles with these guys for years on their ability or in their inability to do non-lethal control. So they focus too much on the lethal control. They just go in and kill everything. Here's a startling stat about this. At any one time in the state of Texas, USDA Wildlife Services has 56,000 snares set. Think about that. 56,000 snares are set in the state of Texas at any one time. So are they targeting something, or can anything step in a snare? Anything can step in a snare, right?
Yeah.
So you could have a river otter, or somebody's pet dog, or something like that. So they indiscriminately are controlling the problem, supposedly. And so I don't like the way that they do things. And I'm actually writing a book on it right now. That's one of my 5 books I have that I've been working on. And it's going to be a good one. It's called License to Kill. License to Kill. And I don't like them, and I just don't like the way they operate, because they indiscriminately kill everything. So if they're going out to kill a wolf, they're going to kill other things too. They're going to kill badgers, foxes, beavers, you name it. They indiscriminately kill everything. Climate change is a big threat. And I showed you for polar bears and for wolverines and Canada lynx, this is a really legitimate threat to them, but it is to the other ones as well. Contaminants. That's one of my expertise areas is contaminants, but they have problems with lead, with mercury, with pesticides. They have a big problem with rodenticides. Rodenticides such as, have you ever seen the little round boxes of Decon? That is an anticoagulant rodenticide. The name is Brodifacoum, and basically when you ingest it, it basically causes your blood to not clot, and so you basically bleed internally. And if you get exposed to enough of it, you die. Well, if a rodent has that and it dies, and then one of the large mammalian carnivores scavenges it, it's going to have secondary poisoning, and it will get poisoned and die also. And so contaminants can be a real issue with these guys. Roads are a big issue. I mentioned Florida panther. 25% of all the Florida panthers every year are killed on the roads. So every year a population that's less than 200 is losing 25% from the vehicles. So and we have roads everywhere. So anytime a wolf is trying to cross the road, or a black bear or a grizzly bear, and I say roads, but that should also include rail. A lot of trains are taking some of these animals out as well. And fear and misconceptions. A lot of people are afraid of wolves, they're afraid of grizzly bears, they're afraid of all the large mountain lions, they're afraid of all those things, and they have misconceptions about them. Another wolverine and mountain lions. So I got like 3 more slides left. So misconceptions regarding large mammalian carnivores. So people think that they're just bloodthirsty predators that pose a danger to humans. That is not the case in almost all instances. So in the few cases where attacks have happened, it's generally because the animals had rabies or other diseases that caused their behavior to become abnormal, or individuals that get boxed into inadequate habitats. You may have heard of people that get attacked by mountain lions while they're riding their bike in California. Well, you basically box mountain lions who have hundreds of mile ranges. You put them in this little tiny area and everything is all developed around it. So they have nowhere to go. And so they're moving around, they come into contact with humans, and sometimes they attack. So you basically have provoked them into an area because you boxed them into such a small area. Even the largest of these carnivores, like grizzly bears, that I've spent a lot of time in grizzly bear territory. They don't want to mess with humans. They just don't want anything to do with you. I've been very close to them out in the wild, and as long as you don't surprise them, or if it's not a mother with cubs, they will generally want nothing to do with you. They will move away. So I could be here and there'd be one over there at the table over there, and I'm walking and I'm making hollering noises, and I'm letting him know that I'm here. He looks over and doesn't want anything to do with me. Just walks away, thinks I'm crazy. So, and seriously, I have done that. I've had a grizzly bear that was probably 50 feet away from me, and the bus driver stopped and said, "There's a grizzly bear right up ahead. You want to get in?" I said, "No, I don't want to get in the bus." So I just started hooping and hollering, continued to walk, and the bear he looked, turned around, and went the other way. So you don't want to surprise them. So if you walk in really thick areas where the vegetation's kind of high and they might be in there feeding and you're walking in there, you might surprise them. That you don't want to do that. So you're always making lots of noise. And the mother with cubs, that one, that one's obvious, and they will protect their cubs at all costs. If they think you're threatening the cubs, watch out. And don't forget that grizzly bears are way faster than any human. You don't want to outrun them because you can't outrun them. The only way you're going to be able to do that is if you're with somebody that you can run faster than. Yeah, so there's different strategies for dealing with black bears and different strategies for grizzly bears. Black bears can climb trees, so they can go all the way up to the top of the tree. So if you try to climb a tree to get away from them, they're going to go all the way up with you. And they're also faster than you. So misconception, they have little to no value to society. We should actively control them in all cases. So I think, as I've shown, ecological, economic, and other important functions highlighted in this talk successfully counter that common misconception. They do have value. They have a lot of value. Large mammalian carnivores take too many livestock and cause too much economic damage to ranchers. In most cases, ranchers are not following the appropriate animal husbandry techniques. They're leaving animals out unguarded. When a baby, like a baby cow, dies, the proper animal technique is to go get it and take it. They're leaving it out there. And so that draws in wolves and other opportunistic scavengers to come in and eat it. And then that causes the problem. So you have to follow these techniques. And there's a whole bunch of techniques that are proven to work to be able to keep away the large mammalian carnivores. All sorts of fencing and llamas even. Llamas are effective. They are able to keep away wolves and bears. So guard dogs, guard llamas, guard donkeys. Donkeys are effective also. So many different ways to be able to keep the predators away from the livestock. Other considerations. Public lands. I just mentioned that. I want to make a pitch to public land. Pay attention to public lands. That's your land. Okay, and so you have to realize that it belongs to all of us. And so we don't want wildlife services going in there and killing all the mammalian carnivores. I don't want that to happen. And so we have a say on how those animals are going to be treated on our land. On private land, it's a different story, but on public land, that's our land. Rewilding, that is a big thing right now. So over the last 10 years or so, people are talking rewilding this, rewilding that. What that means is we're putting the large mammalian carnivores and other organisms back into the ecosystem. So we're going to reintroduce things. So efforts underway on a global scale to rewild large mammalian carnivores. And they're doing that with other organisms also, as well. And then we have some other things that are very interesting. You may have all heard of the ancient DNA work that they've been doing with woolly mammoths, and they're making an effort to try to be able to bring the woolly mammoths back. The problem is that where are you going to put them? Because the environment in which they were adapted is no longer in existence. So, I don't know how they're going to do that, but that is an active research program that's going on to try to bring them back. And we have a woolly mammoth, an entire woolly mammoth skeleton in my museum. I'm curator of mammals in one of the museums, the State Museum in Maryland, and we just had an unveiling of a large woolly mammoth skeleton. And so we have the whole thing in the building, and the ceilings are about 14 feet, and that woolly mammoth is almost up to the ceiling. And so they're very cool. So if you ever get a chance to see a skeleton of a woolly mammoth, you should take it.
Where's that museum located?
It's in Baltimore. It's the Natural History Society of Maryland. So a couple of last thoughts here. Humans got to shift their thinking from control of large mammalian carnivores to coexistence of large mammalian carnivores. Okay, promoting tolerance, ultimately coexistence with large carnivores is a societal challenge, a big one, that can determine the fate of the planet and the largest mammalian carnivores that exist on it, and all that depends on them, including humans. So we actually depend on these guys, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not. Their presence and their ecological function is very important to our existence. And so we need to recognize that, and we need to think about coexistence and not how we can further control them, because they are in big trouble. As I showed you on that slide with the endangered and threatened statuses, everybody except for the coyote is in trouble. So there is my favorite Wolverine picture right there. And so I'm working with these two committees in the American Society of Mammalogists as far as getting this presentation done and approved so that we can circulate it to the wider teacher audience in wherever they want it, probably anywhere in North America. We could probably also get it translated into Spanish for Latin American countries, but in any event, this is what we're doing. So we want to be able to get it in the teachers' hands so that they can then use it. And that's all I got. Questions?
We have three things. Does that affect the animal that eats them?
Yeah, does it affect the animal that eats them? Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. They consume it, it gets digested, and that's the end of it. So it takes it out of the system so that humans won't take that animal. So I was shocked to see that humans died from consuming chronic wasting disease meat. I didn't know that was the case, but like I said a few days ago, there was an article published in the national news about that. Question?
Did I hear, you said polar bear and grizzly bears, same species, or did I hear?
I posed it as a question.
Okay.
So for a long time, 10,000 or more years, they were like this, they were separate. Polar bears up here, grizzly bears here. Climate change, loss of ice, polar bears are moving around. So they're not just up here. Now they're moving around all over the place, and the grizzly bears are coming up like that. And they come into contact to some limited degree. And so if there's very few polar bears and very few grizzly bears coming into contact, when they're ready to mate, they're going to mate with whoever they can mate with. And so if it's a male polar bear and it happens to be a female grizzly bear, so be it. And so my point is that we always think that we know what a real species is, but I don't think in a lot of cases we do, because they have successful mating and they hybridize and the offspring are successful and they can mate also. And our biological species concept, which is one of about 30 different species concepts, that one says that they're separate species that they're reproductively isolated. And so by hybridizing and having fertile offspring, they're not reproductively isolated. So I don't know if they're separate species or not. If you forced me to guess, I'd say that they were the same before they separated out, and the polar bears went Arctic and the grizzly bears stayed subarctic. I would say they were the same, and over a long enough period of time, they have differentiated. And so you see the different features that the polar bear has that the grizzly bear doesn't have. So they're adapted to their particular environments, tundra and boreal forest, basically. And so climate change brought them back together again. So now what's going to happen now? So it depends on how long were they separated, and you know, it just, I don't know what the answer is for how long do they have to be separated before they're separate species. And if you bring them back together before that time, what do you call them? I don't know. It's a tough one.
Hybrids.
Yeah, good, yeah, that's right. What else? Anything else? Ask me something.
Yeah, so if the polar bears can't get the seals, do they resort to eating other things that they would?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that question, because I was going to say something about that and I forgot. Okay, so did anybody see the series? It was over the last 2 years or so. There was a series, well done series. I think BBC might have done it. You know, the series where they show different parts of Earth and they have this amazing photography.
Yes, yeah.
I think it was Planet Earth was the name of the series, and they showed different biomes around the world. So they had savanna, they had deserts, they had forests. They showed the Arctic biome, and they had polar bears in there. And polar bears are struggling to find food. There's pictures on the internet of starving polar bears. It just makes you want to cry. You can see all their bones, and they're just wandering around. You know, probably don't have very long to live, and they're just wandering around starving. They don't have food. But so in order for them to continue to survive, they gotta switch. They gotta prey switch. So if the seals are not available, they gotta find something besides garbage. Because when they find garbage, then they find trouble with humans. So I saw a video or footage on the Planet Earth series with polar bears, where they showed a male polar bear, full-size male, and it had other bears, younger bears, on the shore. And this male polar bear jumped in the water, and he started swimming, and there was a rock that stuck out of the water. It wasn't that big. He got up on that rock, and he was sitting on all fours. He had all fours like this. And you see the footage from right to left. Here comes a bunch of white, big, large white structures, animals coming through there. They were beluga whales. They were belugas. So there was like 3 or 4 belugas. So they came right there. They were reasonably close to where he was standing, but they couldn't see him, obviously. And he jumped one of them, and he nailed a beluga. He had it, and he brought it in and shared it with his buddies. And so he learned that technique. And the other guys on the shore were watching him. So I think the key to their continued survival is not only trying to limit climate change, but they need to switch. They have to figure out how to be successful in catching other prey items. And they were able to catch a beluga whale, full whale. You know, and they're not as big as a regular whale, but that would provide a big meal for quite a while for several bears. So they can get beluga whales. And for the seals on the sea ice moves out. And so they have to travel farther. So if they want to go get a seal, they're going to have to swim farther and expend more energy to get to the sea ice, which has moved out farther off the shore. So normally the sea ice is close. They can just go from the land and get on the sea ice and hunt the seals. But the sea ice, if it's like, 2 miles out, they got to swim 2 miles out there. And so they're expending too much energy looking for a food source that has moved off. So at least in that case, they were successful in switching from one prey to another. But again, that was learned. So that means that learning, that knowledge has to be passed on to other individuals in the population in order for the population as a whole to benefit from that new learned predatory behavior. It's very interesting. What else? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
do you ever see them, you mentioned the rewilding with gray wolves or panthers in this area or in the northeast?
In this area?
Yeah, the northeast of New York. Maine.
No. Well, yeah. So there are gray wolves. So there's a good population in Ontario, and they come down in New York. I have not heard anything about like supplementing them. So I think that maybe New York is happy with what they got right now. With the panther, they're not doing anything with that. So every once in a while we get records of somebody says that they see a mountain lion. I spent 40 some years in the field. I've seen one in my entire time, and that was South Texas. He ran at night. He ran in front of my truck. And I got a really good look at them. So they're hard. The bottom line is they're hard to find. And like I mentioned, in the East, they're listed as extinct. So they're not even here. So nobody's talking about that, but they are talking about some of the states are trying to reintroduce elk. So Pennsylvania's got a big population of elk now. It's in north central Pennsylvania. And they're reintroducing it into Kentucky and Virginia and some of the states in the East, because they used to be here in large numbers, but they've been gone for a long time. And a lot of states are also now doing fisher and marten, which are carnivores. They're smaller carnivores. And Pennsylvania is one of them right now that I know that they're doing that. And they're making a huge error because is everybody familiar with fisher and marten? They're very large weasel family members. Okay, so fishers probably occur here. Martens may occur here also, but
We've had sightings here.
you've had sightings?
Yeah.
So the problem there is that Fisher's the big brother, Martin's the little brother. Okay, and so big brother kills little brother. Okay, and so Pennsylvania has Fishers already, and they're trying to start a Martin reintroduction program. And that Martin reintroduction program is doomed to failure because the Fishers will kill them as soon as they're reintroduced. So they're fascinating animals. I had in my study site in Western Pennsylvania, I had a fisher. I was walking down one of the transect lines going up a hill, and there was a fisher on the tree looking at me, watching me while I was walking, just looking. So fishers are fascinating, and they also messed up my small mammal trap. So they'll get in, they'll find a line of traps, and they'll go in. They'll just try to tear them apart. If there's a mammal in there, they'll try to get the mammal out. And they'll knock them all over the place. So it looked like a tornado came through and just all the traps were like 30 feet away from where they were set. So, so fishers are very interesting. We also had problems with black bears getting into the traps and possums and raccoons. So that's getting a little off topic, but that's just thinking about fisher and marten.
What's the difference between a croaker, a cougar, and a mountain?
Same thing,
Okay,
just different terminology.
that's what I thought.
Yeah, and panther. So Florida panther is a mountain lion. It's a subspecies that occurs only in Florida.
Okay,
And in order for that subpopulation or that subspecies to continue to exist, they went to Texas and they brought mountain lions from Texas and they put them in Florida so that there'd be a larger number so that they would avoid the genetic inbreeding problems that a small population has. So they brought, in other words, they brought in new blood from Texas, they put them there, and then that helped increase their genetic variability.
So are they saying right now that there is no mountain lion in the Adirondacks?
In the east, right?
Okay.
Yep, that's what Fish and Wildlife Service says.
Okay.
But you have to remember that mountain lions will move hundreds of miles in a short period of time. So you could have one in Michigan, and it could move all the way down to Virginia really fast, and it keeps moving. So your chances of being able to detect it are small.
Yeah, well, this one, it ran in front of my car too at night. like,
Really?
A long time
Where?
ago. Up near, I'm not sure, I was going to, in the Adirondacks somewhere, I'm not even sure where anymore. I was going to, somewhere up there.
In the Adirondack area.
That was several years ago, but yeah.
Well, one of the things about mountain lions, besides the fact that they can move huge distances, they have the largest range of any of those species that I talked about today. So they occur all the way from Alaska all the way to southern Argentina and Chile, and everything in between. So their range is incredibly large. So they're very interesting animals.
Yeah,
What about Canada? I mean, do they have the same problems we do with
With large
Decline.
genetic carnivores?
declining population?
Yes, they do, but their populations are, because the human population is much less down up there. They have less urbanization, less development, so their problems are not quite as bad as ours. So to a lesser degree, but they do have the same problems. And they have problems in the western part, in British Columbia and Alberta, they're having huge grizzly bear problems. Because humans are moving into grizzly bear territory, and they start clashing, and then you get people of the provincial governments that want to control them. And so then that becomes an issue. And then you have Native Americans, and the Native Americans want to not control them. And so you end up with that component that makes it more complex when you have them in there, because they want to be able to manage them on their lands, for example. You know, just like the Native Americans in the U.S., they have interest in being able to manage some of these species themselves on their land. So they have to. So the tribal wildlife people have to work with the state and federal wildlife people. And that's not always easy to do that.
No. Sure not.
It's not. Anything else? Ask away. That's what I'm here for.
Well, I'm gonna hand this over. You give one of these to every speaker.
All right. Thank you much.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And everybody, 2 weeks from today, we have somebody who's doing we have research going on with emerald ash borers, and somebody from the company who's put little, what did you explain it, Don? Put the lots, anyway, it's coming to explain the whole thing, how that works in the summer. There will be students going out and checking for the signs of if these things are working and if it's having any effect or not. So emerald ash borers 2 weeks from today.
We have warnings about emerald ash borer in the state of Maryland, and they're basically telling people not to move wood around.
Yeah.
So firewood, because they could be into firewood, and so you take them out camping out in Western Maryland and introduce them out there, and then they start killing all the ash trees out there. So they're devastating our ash trees in Maryland.
They put a lot of them here. Yeah.
So it is, it's just kind of neat research, and it's a write up about it in the newsletter.
Do you guys have spotted lantern flies here yet?
Yes,
You do have them?
A few.
Okay.
we've seen some.
Yeah, we're getting them now, because there's a lot of them in Pennsylvania, and they make their way down into Maryland, and we have warning signs up all over the place. If you see this guy, kill him. I've seen a couple of them. They're beautiful.
Yeah.
With the white with the red spots all over them. They're really cool looking, but they're not good. So- And they live, their main host is tree of heaven, Elanthus altissima. And so that's not native. That's not a native tree. So we control that tree. And so that's the tree that they're looking for. But they'll use other trees. And so that makes them more dangerous. So interesting.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm gonna give them a little broken. You know, I think that was in Saranac, right? Saranac.
Saranac?
Yes, I think it was. It was a seminar I was going to.
Yeah, they have reports now on the.
Thank you, that was a lovely call.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
I'm a friend of theirs.
You are?
But I just wanted to say I can send a message.
I just talked to his wife. I
You
just
just
talked,
talked
yeah,
to
just
that-
very, very recently, yes.
Is she back here then?
No,
She thinks.
not yet. She's gonna come back here, but she's not, she's waiting for her PET scan.
Oh.
She needs to determine if the treatment works or didn't. So, yes.
They're in California. He's in He's in California with her.
Oh, I know. I know. He's not coming back.
Got that there. I didn't really know.
Yeah, well, both families are out there. So his son lives out there and her son lives out there. And so they had a family powwow. And it was determined that he's gotta go somewhere with, 24-hour care all the time. And so she's gonna come back eventually, but that's what she told me.
No, I know that's what she said.
I'm very sad about that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
He was my mentor.
He's a wonderful guy.
He was an extremely wonderful guy.
Yeah, we went, I'm not a scientist, so you know.
It's okay.
3 or 4 of us went to the meeting.
Oh, really? Uh-huh.
And Al was as fit as a pillow, and a spittle. And one time we were chasing this, pole back and forth along the road at nighttime. And he saw a snake in the middle of the road. He said, stop the car, take it out. And everybody said, well, the snake is very poisonous, you know? Oh, I just want to see it, just want to get closer.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He was very,
Oh, that doesn't surprise me at all.
no, he was just so enthusiastic, great.
He was, yeah, and that was one of the drawing cards for me. I mean, he was enthusiastic about taking, there was a couple of us in his class that were like, we really love this stuff. Can we go out and trap small mammals or net bats?
Yeah.
So he liked our enthusiasm and he had enthusiasm, so it was a good mix.
Yeah. Did you know Pete Weber? Too?
I didn't know him well, but I know who he is. He was an ecologist.
He became a friend. They both became friends of my husband who passed away.
Right.
But my husband wasn't there when you were there, so you would know.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I really, really liked this.
Thank you very
Do
much.
use any phrases like keystone species?
I tried to.
A new.
No, that's a word that it's been around for a while, but some people don't like it. Some people use umbrella species, some people use synonyms for that. So, no, I didn't use that. It wasn't a conscious thing. It was just I didn't need to use it. I didn't think. I mean, they are, in a way, they are keystone species.
Well, these big predators are.
They are.
Now, if they're moving elk into Pennsylvania, they'll probably move something into New York. But we don't have the big. We don't have any big predators here.
No.
So why
No,
are they-
so, all right, so that's gonna be an issue.
Why are they doing that then?
Probably because of public pressure. Maybe the public wants something else to hunt. So maybe they're bored with white-tailed deer and they want a bigger challenge.
Yeah, I know of people up north who are big hunters and they went in helicopter trap and helicopters out to the northwest
Yeah,
to
I
do
think it kind of enables.
wolf shooting. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe they were doing it.
Yep, yep.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
they just, I mean, they're so focused on controlling these guys when they need to be coexisting.
Yeah. Why do they have to have this
I don't know.
stuff that?
I mean, so think about the mentality, when Europeans came over and started settling the US, and they started moving westward, the whole mindset was control everything, cut down the trees, kill the predators, establish livestock, grow crops, but it was all control, control, control. They never thought for a second to coexist with. So that mindset is still there in a lot of people, and we have to change that.
You think it's in the genes, in the genetic code?
What's that?
You think it's in the genetic code or is it something learned?
You know, that's an interesting question. I think it's possible that it is. And so so if it's hardwired, then that's gonna be really hard to change.
I see so many trees being cut down recently too.
Oh, I hate it.
Terrible.
I hate it. I really don't like that.
Trees, I know, they're just,
They have,
well, like you say, there's housing development. I know where housing development has just
Oh, it's awful.
taken all the free
Yeah.
land around Oswego practically.
It's awful. I hate it.
Yeah, even over by the lake and everything. Even over by the lake.
I know.
Yeah, but
Yeah, in my area, it's everywhere. I just cannot believe that we need that much more housing.
I can't either because I don't think they plan enough to say who's going to live in this house.
Right.
They don't.
Well,
plan.
and then they don't plan the infrastructure around it. So they're gonna end up with a parking lot on the highway right there.
right, yeah.
Because they didn't plan.
Yes, you're right. Doesn't it get discouraging?
Yeah,
It does.
they just scoop up the land. It's just like crazy.
Coffee and
Yep.
all kinds of stuff.
All right.
So delightful to hear you speak.
I'm glad to be here. I loved it. As soon as I had the opportunity, it's like, I'm there.
We used to live in Jefferson County. And we're just, we came here and just love it here.
It is very nice. Thank you.
Glad you showed up. I love this.
I
Just wanted
I'll make sure
like
I check
to
it out.
Always
Always around the chest.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
It's been up today.
I was.
Computer, I've been watching the chat to see if it.
Watching the birds all the time.